scouting, and my father had a business which was largely outdoor work in a lumber yard, and where I cut my teeth over summers and weekends working when I was able to through high school and university, and that exposure to being outdoors and appreciating the world around us was a very much an influence of around me. I don't think it was ever in my mind at that time that there was a career trajectory that was laid out directly. My generation, really in relationship to what the opportunities are available to young people today, and the myriad of pathways that you can move forward in. And it was very, you go to university, you become a doctor, dentist, lawyer, and so forth. And but I was also very mindful of the power of education, power of learning, and the importance of that in terms of getting ahead in life and experiencing life. And I really was very appreciative of many of the things that I was afforded when I was growing up, even though I didn't know what I didn't have, and my parents really made ends meet. Not knowing what many of the things that may have been opportunities for others. I just know hard work and just having broad interest was something of importance, and really appreciated that. I appreciated the fact family was important too, and so I'm very, very proud of my three children and the family that we built together and raised, and to see them succeed and in their lives has been wonderful to see as well. And so really being a person of society and contributing and finding pathways to make an impact, whether it's in our personal lives and or in our professional lives. And so I think that laid the foundation for many of the things that unfolded later on that influenced me.
That's interesting because although, as you mentioned, as many of the leader generation nowadays in the past, they came from a families that is believes in education, but even they didn't have the luxury to have the same access to education as we do have nowadays. But how was your relation with your mom and dad when you were a child? Who was encouraging you for education, was encouraging you to go outside? Because having an activities outdoor, as you mentioned, it's not like as focusing on education and study.
So I think the pathway to education as a means to success was particularly important to them. My father was a veteran of the Second World War and injured and not able to continue his education really in a formal way after service and recovering from his injuries. He left high school in the Depression to make ends meet. His desire was to be an architect, actually. Wow. And in that respect, he had a very big impact on my cousin, who was his nephew, who did become an architect. But my father was very, very keen on that sort of pathway for himself, but that opportunity didn't present itself for a lot of reasons. My mother stayed at home to raise a family, but she worked up until I was born, and was at that time commerce and business and accounting and was something that she did. But she completed her high school at Central Commerce and then went into the workforce and did that work until she had a family. But at the end of the Second World War, she really stayed, worked because her brother was returning back from serving in the Air Force, and he became an engineer, civil engineer, actually at U of T. And he had that opportunity, but she basically worked to put him through school. And her parents died very young, and as my father's parents as well. So they were really left very young to figure out their lives under very the circumstances of the era, and their value proposition was hard work, discipline, and so forth. But everything they did for my sister and I, and I valued that. My mother, stay-at-home mom. My father worked hard. I would say my mother was probably the disciplinarian and some similar temperament, and so we'd always have very spirited conversations about lots of things going on. I had a deep respect for my father, for just his life and many of the things he experienced. I couldn't begin to comprehend, but I enjoyed the opportunity to be able to work with him while I was in high school and to spend time with, even when I was a kid, hanging out around the lumber yard, and I learned how to use tools and be able to do things with my hands, and I really valued that experience and the time we had together. And it was they were great parents. And of course, as kids, you have different perspectives in the time, but reflecting back on my childhood and the relationships I had with my parents, loving parents and important in terms of what it meant to me when I had my family.
Can I say that Stephen is a handyman? So you do things at home, for example. So is your wife happy with that?
Well, yeah. So I'm, I can use this. I can use electric saws and equipment, and I take great pride in that. I wish I had more time to do things on my own, but anything I could do on my own, I would do on my own, and I had that ability to do it because I had that experience, and I have sawdust literally flowing through my veins, and anything wood is particularly of interest to me. And to that note, I regret that my father didn't live long enough, but I built a log home up north, and not really a cottage, but a four-season log home. I wish I had done it myself. My father would have been fairly disappointed that I didn't spend time doing it myself. But I think I regret he wasn't around to project manage it and so forth. But yes, I attempt to be handy in that regard as well. So.
Awesome.
And one note, my late wife was a landscape architect, and but when it came to gardening, I was the labor, right? So,
Okay.
So
Exactly. That's why I said she's lucky at that time and she's putting some pressure. Did you like that all of our wives wants us to work at home regardless of
and endless list of chores, and many of them I didn't necessarily always get to, but yeah.
Going back to your, I would say high school or elementary school, what was your preferable subject? Was it chemistry and biology as you are?
So sciences was certainly the thread that guided me in through high school, thinking that I might have moved into medicine or a profession like that. That would seem to be the trajectory. I had a number of influences, and and thinking that was something of interest to me. But I had a broad interest in the sciences anyway. But that being said, some of the most impactful and wonderful courses I took were in English and in history. I had a grade 10 history teacher, and I would say as a subject, I just loved history, and I still read a lot of history and gravitate to, with biographical, work or just really, historical reflections and various periods of time, and I really enjoyed that work and the subject material, and I had an excellent teacher, and the same with English as well. There was at that time lots of interest in the lyrics of really accomplished musicians that are well recognized today, like Bob Dylan, who of course won a Nobel Prize and Leonard Cohen and so bringing a contemporary field to a subject that a lot of high school, like, why did I study English, right? But taking a bit of a twist to look at English in a way that would attract young people to the subject. The other was music. So music was another particular thread, and I took music beginning from grade 6, started playing an instrument right through, and then became an accomplished technical music player of the trumpet.
Wow.
But I continued to be involved extracurricularly in music right through the end of high school, including taking it as a course and subject area. And not that I ever thought that I would have a career in music, but I really enjoyed it and thrived. So I think I had an eclectic range of interests, and that attracted me to learning and so forth. And I even, in my own way, attempted to play, competitive sports. I wasn't the most overly athletic person, but I was really keen. Played football, wrestled until I broke my collarbone. But loved to play lacrosse, which was, and I was not tall enough to play basketball, although I enjoyed playing basketball, and we had an outstanding high school basketball program at the school I went to, as well as an outstanding music program. So, I think the idea was just to experience it all, right? I really wanted to experience it all, but the courses I took prepared me to go into sciences and university.
But now it's like quite interesting because now you can be an athlete, can be a musician, which at that time, it's like big stars and those more attractive to, but maybe for the younger generation, and you can be learning about history and education and science. Why did you select science over all of those?
Well, so yeah, I would say there was some familial, pressures, and I wouldn't say pressures, but you're going to be a doctor, or you be this. I mean,
Okay.
the professions, the range of opportunities we see as a result of things that have transformed society, whether it's in digital technologies and the pathways unfolding with respect to generative AI and quantum science. And engineering and so forth. That the sciences were a pathway in those days to jobs, right? Go to university and to go to do something, right? And I would say not that my parents discouraged me from an academic type of activity. I'm not certain they really fully appreciated or understood it necessarily, but there were relatives who had become academics, but the idea of getting a foot in a profession was a key to success, right? That was sort of the measure of success, and it was much cultural as it was just what parents wished for their children to be successful and so forth. My son the doctor, or my son the daughter the lawyer, and whatever it would be. But that was probably one factor. But I would say I personally had an interest in science. I had some good science teachers, and certainly a chemistry prof, rather teacher in high school who was outstanding, and even topics like physics and in biology were they were interesting. I mean, there was that aspect of it that also influenced me as well. I don't think I was interested enough in a subject like history to think about that as a degree opportunity. I couldn't see through what that really meant. I wasn't necessarily interested in becoming a lawyer or the social sciences. I thought sciences offered a lot, and in the background of my experiences, I really enjoy being in the outdoors. And through university, at some point, I stopped working in the lumberyard, and I got a job with the Ministry of Natural Resources in the summertime, working as a resource technician, doing lake surveys, and I was associated with an acid rain program around mitigation around acid rain, and entailed surveys and analysis of and inventories of the lakes in Ontario. And I got to work in northwestern Ontario and doing things that even from a subject area, I wasn't a well-proficient wildlife biologist. I was or an ichthyologist or water chemist. I was studying microbiology as it turned out in university, but that was just a fulfillment of a strong desire to really experience the environment and in a way. And I was very influenced by some early readings of Rachel Carson's work that really opened up the world to the impact of toxic chemicals that were being used in the late 50s and 60s, and a scientist in the United States who really didn't have the type of career that gave her the kind of recognition and leadership that she deserved in her work, but was subsequently recognized through the body of work of her influence on environmental problems and the impact of human activity and chemicals and their applications in the environment. So all those things sort of strung together, and I think fueled that continued interest in science.
Why did you select Western University?
Well, yeah. So notwithstanding the expense of going away to university, and even it was a much smaller cost in my generation to go to university than it is today. But you could effectively work in the summertime and make most of what you needed to go to university, even with a bit of help from my parents, to the extent that they were able to help. But I knew I needed to leave Toronto.
Okay.
I could not. I grew up in central Midtown Toronto, and for me, going to U of T or even to York University was something that just, I think, would have been just like going to high school. I just needed to separate. So it was either going to be Queens or Western, and I think partly because I had some friends who actually ended up going to Queens, and at that time, Western just had a brand new student center. It's just at the time an attractive physical environment, but I decided to go to Western just because it was one of the top 2 universities. And I was influenced a little bit because we had a neighbor who actually went to Western, and I knew a little bit about that. And you flip through the calendars. I applied to U of T, McMaster. I got a scholarship to go to McMaster, but McMaster wasn't the university it is today. And at the time, I just thought, okay, Hamilton. That was actually a little bit too close to home because my father grew up in Hamilton, and I thought, okay, I gotta really move away. So 2.5 hours away from Toronto seemed to be the right distance, or 2 hours away from Toronto seemed to be the right distance. And I had a remarkable experience personally, and from my university experience.